The sun dips low in the African sky as we approach the final bend to Hilhave, the last village on Wednesday's medical mission list. We are tired, drenched in sweat, caked in red dust, having traveled the washboarded dirt roads shoulder to shoulder with our African brethren, sharing songs and stories of how God has worked in our lives. The villagers have sat patiently now, 4 hours past our appointed arrival time, and look at us hopefully as we climb stiffly from our rusted van, wondering what we might be bringing for them. Who knows what they have heard? That the white missionaries are coming with doctors, medicine, malaria nets, and perhaps miracles? What they don't know is that the last remaining supply of mosquito nets was exhausted at the previous village, and that there are no medicines left, except a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol and some multivitamins. On cue, they dutifully form single file, mothers carrying small children wrapped in shawls, crippled elderly men and women, pregnant mothers and school-age kids. The long line snakes around the corner, past the last thatched hut at the other end of the village. Our medical group glances quickly at each other, realizes their respective appointed task, and dutifully examines each person in that line with a smile, a hand on a shoulder, hearing their heart and lungs with a stethoscope, and administering to each African soul one Tylenol or one multivitamin, until they have all been seen and gone home knowing that they had received all the miracles that were available to them that day. As a physician, I struggle even today with the knowledge that that day I gave only a vitamin to a woman who had showed me a breast mass the size of an orange, likely a cancer, and I had done nothing for the teenage boy who had worried that he had AIDS. That day that had started in other villages with joyful dedication of freshwater wells and life-saving malaria nets ended with a new knowledge of our inadequacy. Glum, discouraged, we rode home in the dark, and I wondered if Hilhave had been the recipients of a sham rather than blessings shared from God's servants. The purpose-driven life had been on my mind, having carried Rick Warren's book on the plane from New York, and I find myself asking, what was my purpose here? What was my mission? Purpose-driven mission, what does that mean? Clarity of our mission, of our purpose, is refined with time, maturity, experience, and most importantly, a confident trust in God for His hand in what we are doing. I know now what I didn't know that day, that the experience in Hilhave was intentional, God-given, and a lesson from God in humility, trust, and stewardship, and a reminder that I could do better. Clarity of mission purpose can only be possible after careful reflection, prayer, deliberate submission to the elegance of God's purpose, unfolding in spite of our best efforts. There are many potential directions in which we can express mission, and they are all in themselves noble endeavors. Sharing the gospel, feeding the poor, healing the sick, empowering women, developing pastoral leadership, to name just a few. Discerning the appropriate mission purpose can be elusive and often, ultimately, will be multifaceted. Our duty, however, is to engage in ongoing self-scrutiny, not only of our operational effectiveness, but even more importantly, as to whether we are listening to God as He nudges us along the path of His intention. Personality-driven, divergent tension is part of our human condition, and experience tells us that frequently the most assertive participant wins the argument, even more so if they are in positions of authority. Though challenging, we must commit ourselves to an ongoing conversation, embrace the dialogue, and refine direction accordingly. Acknowledge that God can and will work through us and for great things if we, with humility, submit to the direction He leads us. The foundation I'm working with struggled recently with what we initially considered a divisive, mixed agenda which weakened our sense of unified purpose, whether our mission was to exclusively deliver healthcare or to divert scarce resources preferentially to efforts at political engagement, pursuing peace and reconciliation in South Sudan. In Jonglei State, Three rival tribes live and fear each other and have a history of cattle raiding, fierce village attacks, and child kidnapping. Just 6 months ago, attackers from one of these villages had brutally raided 15 miles north of our clinic and burned all the homes to the ground, leaving 90 civilians dead, many of them women and children. In what could only be possible through God's grace, we crafted a mission then that brought these two objectives of healthcare and reconciliation together, and flew into the heartland of each of these three tribes, selecting 30 of their people that were blind with cataracts. After surgery had restored the sight of these 90 blind men and women in a miraculous 48 hours, they were flown back to their respective tribes. And prior to returning, the newly sighted of the three villages joined in a circle together and passionately gave thanks to God who had brought them the miracle of sight through this very tangible dividend of peace. They climbed back on that airplane, unassisted, and shared their story in their village in their own way when they returned. I will never forget John Dow's simple observation that day as the last plane load flew home. What happened this week? It was a God thing. So this is what I conclude. Each day, as we sit humbly before our Creator, we are refined and made new. Sitting still and quiet before Him, as we open our heart and engage our minds, we know that again today He will clarify and send us on our purpose-driven mission.